My daughter stopped talking to me after the divorce, without ever hearing my side of the story. Now, 8 years later, she has reached out to me, but only because of an inheritance. I am 54 years old now, and my ex-wife is 48. It has been 8 years since our divorce, and my daughter, now 28, cut off all contact with me, siding entirely with her mother. She did not even care to ask for my perspective. It took me a long time to accept how things turned out, and I will not lie, it was tough. Part of the difficulty was that my ex-wife did everything she could to destroy my reputation. But the hardest part was losing my daughter, who I loved more than anything. Being completely cut out of her life was the most painful thing I have ever experienced. Since she was already an adult at the time of the divorce, I had no way to be part of her life if she did not want me there. She made it clear that she was firmly on her mother's side. I do not have much family left, just my mom, who suffered from Alzheimer's. That made the whole experience even harder. I tried reaching out to my daughter a few times after the divorce, but she stood by her mother and refused to hear my side of the story. At one point, my ex even threatened to take me to court for harassment if I did not stop trying to contact her. That was my breaking point, and I decided to stop trying altogether. For the last 8 years, my life has been about taking care of my mom and focusing on my career. I had a few short relationships, but I have never been able to trust people fully since the divorce. That has been my life for nearly a decade. Then, recently, out of the blue, my daughter contacted me. I was over the moon, thinking she had finally come to understand that the divorce was not entirely my fault. It meant even more to me because my mom had recently passed away, and I was dealing with that loss alone. I was desperate for family and support. My daughter called me a few months after my mom's passing. The call came from an unfamiliar number, and when I picked up, I did not recognize the voice. It had been so long since we last spoke. I was shocked when she introduced herself. She said she had seen on Facebook that her grandmother had passed and wanted to check on me. That stunned me. I had no idea she was even keeping tabs on me through social media. I thought it was a kind gesture. I thanked her for the call, told her I was doing okay, and admitted how much I missed her. We chatted a little, and she suggested we meet in person to talk more. I agreed immediately. We decided she would come over to my place that weekend. I was so excited to see her after all these years. I prepared dinner for her, and was a bundle of nerves when I opened the door. I barely recognized her. Time had changed her so much. At first, things were a little awkward, but as we started talking, the tension eased. She shared what her life and work had been like, and I opened up about everything that had happened to me over the years. After dinner, we finally addressed the elephant in the room. I asked her why she had never tried to hear my side of the story during the divorce, and why she automatically sided with her mother. I admitted that her mom had been more present in her life as a stay-at-home parent while I worked long hours in construction. But I had always made an effort to spend as much time as I could with her. She said she regretted how things turned out and admitted that she had been too young to understand everything. She had been heavily influenced by her mother, who painted me as the villain, someone who cared only about himself. Since she had never heard my perspective, she just accepted her mother's version of events as the truth. We talked about it for a while longer, and the conversation was going well. As the evening went on, the real reason for my daughter's visit slowly started to surface. We had been talking for hours when I finally asked her what had prompted her to reach out after all these years. She looked uncomfortable for a moment before saying she wanted to be honest with me. She admitted that she had been keeping tabs on me through Facebook. When she learned about her grandmother's passing, she expected lawyers to contact her about the inheritance. When that did not happen, she decided to reach out to me directly. She claimed she wanted to give me time to grieve, but now, with her recent engagement, she desperately needed money for her wedding. Hearing this was like a punch in the gut. I had thought, prayed even, that this was finally my chance to rebuild our relationship, to have my daughter back in my life. But it turned out she had no interest in me as a person. She was only after the inheritance. The worst part? It was not even her inheritance to begin with. By law, everything belonged to me. Truthfully, I could not care less about the money. I live in a modest condo, have no expensive hobbies, and most of my clothes come from Target. If she had come to me genuinely and with love, I would have gladly helped her with her wedding. But the fact that she was using me, thinking only about money, made my stomach turn. These thoughts swirled in my mind as I tried to stay calm. I asked her, "Is this all you came for?" She started backpedaling, claiming the inheritance was just a secondary concern and that her real goal was to repair our relationship. She said she had been meaning to reach out for a long time, but had been too afraid I would not forgive her for cutting me off so suddenly all those years ago. She even blamed her mother's manipulation, saying it had made it harder for her to approach me. I was torn. A part of me wanted to believe her, but doubt clouded my judgment. Her timing and words felt too calculated. I asked her how she even knew about the inheritance, and she explained that years ago, when she visited my late mother, my mom had told her she wanted everything left by my dad to go to her as the only grandchild. At that time, my marriage was stable, and it made sense for my mom to say that. But things had changed, and my daughter's actions over the years had created a distance that could not be ignored. Her words stung. It seemed her focus was not on mending our relationship but on the money. The false hope she gave me was devastating. I realized I needed to test her intentions. Calmly, I told her there was no inheritance. I said my mom had left everything to me years ago, and that I had plans to use the money to start a business. However, I offered to help her with her wedding expenses out of my own savings, suggesting a few $1,000s for her needs. Her face fell, and the look of disappointment confirmed my worst fears. She thanked me for the offer, but insisted she deserved at least part of the inheritance as the only grandchild. She said it was her grandmother's money, and that it had been promised to her. I calmly replied that while I wanted to help her, my decision was final. If she was not happy with my offer, there was nothing more I could do. Her face turned red with anger. She grew louder, demanding that I reconsider, but I stood firm. Her reaction only solidified my doubts about her intentions. Finally, she lost her composure and said something that cut me deeply, though it also gave me clarity. She spat. "I should have known you would always be the selfish bastard my mom said you were. No wonder you are alone." I looked at her, hiding my pain as best I could, though my heart ached. Her words stung, but by that point, I had already seen her true colors. I did not expect her to get honest so quickly. After her outburst, I stopped her before she could continue. I told her that I should have known she was her mother's daughter, and that the only reason she would reach out to anyone was to ask for a favor. I also pointed out that using my grief over my mother's death to manipulate me was disgusting, even for someone like her. She tried to respond, but I just laughed bitterly and told her that if she had not blocked my number all these years, she would have seen the messages I sent about her grandmother. Maybe then, she would have inherited most of the estate, if not all of it. My words had the effect I intended. She looked stunned and asked what I meant. I told her to unblock me on her old phone number so I could forward all the messages I had sent her over the years. Messages that never reached her. She hesitated but did it. Then, I sent her everything, messages where I begged her to hear my side, updates about her grandmother's Alzheimer's diagnosis, and my attempts to arrange for them to meet while her grandmother still remembered her. The truth was, in the early stages of her illness, my mom often mentioned my daughter and expressed her desire to see her. It broke my heart that I could not fulfill that wish. Now, seeing my daughter demand an inheritance she had no right to, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. After reading the messages, my daughter looked visibly shaken. She apologized and said that it was clear from the messages that her grandmother had wanted her to have a share of the estate. She added that it was unfair to punish her for being young and not understanding everything during the divorce. She claimed she genuinely wanted to rebuild our relationship but suggested that if I chose to be selfish now, she would feel uncomfortable continuing any contact. I replied that if money was the cornerstone of our relationship, perhaps we should not try to rebuild it at all. Deep down, I wanted to believe her when she spoke about fixing things between us. I truly did. But at that moment, I just could not. I told her I was willing to consider giving our relationship another chance, but she would not receive any part of the inheritance. Her face twisted with anger, and she stormed out without saying another word. I did not stop her. Since then, I have spoken to a few friends about what happened. Most of them agree I did the right thing, but one of my closest friends said that since I do not care about the money, I should just let it go and give her a share if it means having family in my life. I disagree, but his words have been stuck in my head ever since. Should I give her part of the inheritance? Let us pause here. If you have thoughts, feel free to share them in the comments. Now, let us move on to the update. Update 1. What happened during the divorce? Many of you have asked about what went down during my divorce. I have not talked about it in years, but I think it is time to share. My ex-wife and I were married for 23 years. After so much time together, you would think she would not betray me, but she did. I do not want to go into too much detail, but I found out she had been cheating on me with multiple men. This had apparently been going on for years before I finally discovered the truth. When everything came to light, I was devastated. I did not know how to cope and started drinking heavily. Out of spite, I even cheated on her in return. My life spiraled out of control. We fought constantly, and my behavior, along with the drinking, made it easy for her to manipulate our daughter into taking her side. For almost a year, we lived separately in this toxic state before finally deciding to divorce. At the time, my ex-wife was working as a journalist and was something of a local celebrity. She used her influence and connections to try to destroy my reputation, and she nearly succeeded. After the divorce, it took me a long time to get my life back on track. Quitting drinking and rebuilding myself was not easy, and having my daughter cut me out of her life entirely only made it harder. I admit that when I first learned about my ex-wife's infidelity, I lost it. During that time, and for about a year after the divorce, I was hardly present as a parent. For the most part, I kept to myself after the divorce. Once I got sober and got my life back on track, the first thing I did was try to contact my daughter and apologize. But she refused to listen, blocked me everywhere, and made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me. I thought that if I gave her time, she might come around. 8 years later, not only did she not come around, but our relationship only got worse. Now, on to the second big question, my mom's inheritance. Technically, the money originally belonged to my dad. My grandparents were both doctors, and over the course of their careers, they bought multiple properties around the city. Most of them were rental properties that generated a decent income. My dad passed away when I was 21, leaving everything to my mom. All the properties and assets were in her name during my marriage, and for several years after my divorce, until her health started to decline. When my mom passed away, I inherited everything as her only heir. My ex-wife did not get anything during the divorce except for alimony, which stopped a few years ago when she remarried. At the time of our divorce, all the assets were legally owned by my mom, so they were not part of the settlement. So, here is how things stand. My daughter was never in a position to inherit anything. She did know that her grandmother owned several properties and rented out a few homes through Airbnb. I never touched that money because the income from my construction business was more than enough for me to live comfortably. I hope this answers everyone's questions. Also, my daughter has not reached out since that day, and I do not think she will. Honestly, I think she made it clear that her only motivation was the inheritance. Now that it is off the table, I do not expect her to reappear. I will not lie, it still hurts. But at this point, I have learned not to expect too much from people, no matter who they are. So, that is where things stand. Thank you to everyone who sent kind words of support. I truly appreciate it. I am also starting to think that it might be time to focus on rebuilding my personal life. Maybe it is time to start dating again, to find a partner, instead of waiting for ghosts from my past to come back. Update 2. This week has been intense, to say the least. I thought the previous update would be my last, but life clearly had other plans for me. I had just gotten home from work and hanging out with some friends when the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone, but I went to answer it. And there she was, my ex-wife. My worst nightmare, standing on my doorstep. She looked different. Her hair was styled differently, and she had lost weight. It took me a few seconds to recognize her, but you do not easily forget someone you spent decades of your life with. Seeing her again was a shock, to say the least. I just stood there speechless in awkward silence. She asked if I could spare some time to talk. I hesitated but figured it was better than leaving her standing on my porch, so I invited her in. It was as awkward as you would expect. We made small talk for a bit before she said she had something important to tell me. I told her to go ahead. That is when she said our daughter had come to her, talking about the inheritance. Honestly, I had been expecting that. Why else would my ex-wife be here after all these years? She went on to say she understood how hard the divorce had been on me and admitted that she might have gone too far back then. I could not help but let out a bitter laugh, but she ignored it and kept talking. She said I should not punish our daughter for what happened between us. She echoed some of the things my daughter had said, that during the divorce, she was too young to understand, and that I should not blame her for siding with her mom. That was when I cut her off. I told her I did not hold any grudges against either of them anymore. But I admitted that it hurt deeply to realize my daughter had only thought to reconnect with me because of the possibility of inheriting money. I repeated the same thing I had told my daughter. If she had had the decency to try to mend our relationship earlier, she would have received the inheritance. My ex-wife tried to justify things, but I told her my decision was final. I made it clear that if they were going to keep circling back to the same topic, it was a waste of time. I told her I had plans to attend to, and if she had nothing else to discuss, it was probably best for her to leave. She nodded, apologized for disturbing me, and I assured her it was not necessary. Then she left. After she was gone, I just sat there, completely bewildered. I never thought I would see her again, let alone have a conversation with her in my own home. It was surreal, and brought up a flood of old memories I would have preferred to leave buried. Later, I met up with some friends and tried to put the whole encounter out of my mind. But yeah, that is what happened, and I needed to get it off my chest. Update 3. Earlier today, while I was at work, my daughter called me. I thought about not answering, but curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. Right away, I told her that if this was about the inheritance again, there was no point in us talking. She assured me it was not, and said she wanted to discuss something else. I asked her to continue, and she said she had been doing a lot of thinking about everything that had happened. She told me she felt she owed me an apology. She admitted she had handled things poorly, and said that if I was willing to forgive her and give our relationship another chance, she would be happy to have me at her wedding. I was stunned. I asked if she was sure about this, and she confirmed. She added that I could take some time to think about it, and let her know if I would attend. I agreed, and we ended the call. Now I am completely torn. On one hand, the thought of being at her wedding fills me with joy. On the other, I cannot shake the feeling that this might just be another attempt to win my favor and ultimately get the inheritance. But if she is truly sincere, I do not want to miss the chance to rebuild our relationship. If I decline, and she never reaches out again, I could not blame her. I would appreciate any advice if anyone has thoughts on this. Update 4. After much thought, I decided to attend the wedding. Many of you pointed out that going to the wedding would not hurt anything, and that makes sense. It does not mean I have to do anything in return for the invitation. And no, I will not be walking her down the aisle. I am just invited as a guest, and that is fine with me. I understand that going from someone she has not spoken to in 8 years to someone playing such a central role would be too big of a leap for both of us. I genuinely hope this can be the start of a new chapter, that we can build something meaningful in our relationship. Thank you to everyone who listened to my story and offered advice. I truly appreciate it, and I hope you will wish me luck. That is the end of the updates. The story cuts off here, and we do not know what happened next. Now, I invite you all to speculate. What do you think happened? Personally, I believe he ultimately gave her the inheritance. Why? Because there were no further updates. If he had not given it to her, I think he would have come back here to defend his decision and emphasize his principles. For some, this choice might seem weak, but if he truly did not care about the money, why not give it to his biological daughter? At least, that is how I see it. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with me or not? Thanks for reading this story.